at the Chai Academy. If you're new to this is our 4 times a week we give this class, and each class is independent. And if you're not new to this, welcome back. So the topic, the course, the general course is Jewish ethics and beliefs. And we've discussed probably 15 or 20 separate ethics. Today is something called Bikur Cholim, which means visiting the sick. Now, in Judaism, we've said this before, in Judaism, every single mitzvah, every single command, every single request, etc., is incumbent upon everybody. We do not have a hierarchy where, this is what the rabbi has to do, and this is what the lay person has to do. You have that in Christianity, where the priest has to remain celibate, as an example. I'm not a connoisseur, but whereas the lay people do not. In Judaism, it's everybody's in the same boat. And it's also true with regards to visiting the sick. A rabbi of course, has to visit the sick. Make my weekly trips. This is pre-COVID anyway. To the hospitals, and now when I can get in, I'll go. It's not always so easy. But it's not only upon the burden is not only upon the rabbi, or the responsibility is not only upon the rabbi. The responsibility is also on a layperson to visit the sick. Somebody you know, somebody you don't know. I know Gurwin years ago had this para-chaplaincy program where they used to get lay people to go onto the floors, up and down the floors, to visit people, because there are many people there who did not get a visitor. And it's correct. So visiting the sick, if a rabbi does not do it, they're going to get somebody upset because, I'm a member of your congregation, you didn't come visit me, what's wrong with you? You're cold, you're callous, you're this, you're that. But once again, it's not only a rabbi's obligation. You're obligated to visit a friend, you're obligated to visit a relative, you're obligated to visit someone you know, and in general, the COVID has changed the dynamic somewhat, but it's out there that one should visit the sick. Now, it is Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, is an incredible mitzvah. And in fact, the Talmud says the difference between visiting the sick and not visiting the sick is literally life and death. In other words, when you visit the sick, you give life. When somebody who's sick is not in the hospital and does not get visited, it can lead to an early demise. And the Talmud actually tells a story where that the Rabbi Chelbo, he was from the Talmud, Rabbi Chelbo, mentioned in the Talmud that he one time got sick, and he was laid up, and he was in bed, and nobody came to visit him. So another Rabbi Kahana, said, nobody is visiting Rabbi Chelbo, we have to visit him. He says, because there's a story, and Rabbi Kahana tells a story about that there was this person who was sick, and the great Rabbi Akiva went to visit him, and Rabbi Akiva fed him. Rabbi Akiva swept the floors. Rabbi Akiva polished the candlesticks. And Rabbi Akiva he was the great Rabbi Akiva, right? He spoon-fed this fellow. And the fellow, after, at one point, the fellow said to Rabbi Akiva, you have revived me. So Rabbi Akiva's response is that if you do not go and visit the sick, then you and you willingly don't go, not that you don't know about it, but you're asked to go and you don't go. He says because it's so deleterious to the patient's health, you could be considered a murderer. Now, not murder in the literal sense, but you get the idea. It's not a good idea not to go if you can go. I recently went to a local hospital here, and because of COVID, they turned me away. So I said, no, visiting hours. I said, yeah, I'm a member of the clergy. They said, so what? So I said, you can't confine me to those 3 hours. It's not always possible. So they said, you either come those 3 hours or don't come at all. So, I put in a complaint, but I got nowhere. So it's not easy. It's not easy, but we still strive and do the best we can. The Talmud mentions, and I don't quite know how this actually plays out, but the Talmud mentions that when we visit the sick, we take away 1/60th of their illness. Why 1/60 as opposed to not 1/59th? What does it mean, take away from their illness? I guess the idea is that you make them happy and therefore they feel stronger, or you reinvigorate them, you revive them, so to speak, and therefore they feel less sick. Now, does that mean if 60 people come, they're fully well and healthy? That's what I mean. I don't understand. Or is it just a cumulative 1/60th regardless of who goes? I'm not sure. Really don't know. And it's interesting, there are halachas, Jewish law tells us, and this is what, when the Sinia facility, when they wanted this para-chaplaincy, in order to become a para-chaplain, partial chaplain, a volunteer, you had to go through a training course. And the training course is actually in halacha, it's Jewish law, and for the most part, aside from when you go to the person, you ask the person if there's in pain, is there anything I can do? And the obligation is to, if the person's in pain, you go to the nurse and say, he needs help. He's been pressing the button, but nobody's coming. Or he or she needs to get changed, or they need help getting to the bathroom or whatever. Aside from just very practical stuff, you also have to be uber sensitive. Sensitivity is key here. So, as an example, when I come, this is based on Jewish law, and I guess it's an ethic, and when I come, I smile. And I never, because you're not allowed to, if there's somebody's in bad shape, I do not show shock on my face. I didn't go, ooh, or something like that. Never. Poker face. No matter, the person looks good, the person looks bad, and you smile. And the person looks good, say, hey, you're looking really, really good. That's fine. But you never say, hey, you're looking really, really bad today. Or, so that is actually Jewish law. Also, even if the person is resting, or the person is in a drug-induced coma, they because they put in a vent, so they give him some strong sedatives. You don't speak about their condition, and you definitely don't speak about the graveness of their condition in front of them. When the family starts talking to me to say, the doctor's given him a week, I say, shh, out. We'll talk outside. Don't talk inside about the person, about their condition. You don't, we know there's a HIPAA law that you don't talk in the elevator. So think of it the same way. You don't talk in front of the patient either. You just don't. Because, you can get carried away, and the person maybe, for somewhat conscious or semi-conscious, and will hear things that they should not hear ideally. So you never say oy vey. You don't say you look terrible. You don't say, and so you just basically, you're very, very careful, and everything is very, between you and the family is not said, once again, in front of the patient. And the patient, we're told, sort of monitors the reaction of the visitors. So if a visitor comes in and goes like this, and they cry, a child comes in, it's contain yourself. Contain yourself. You need to take a good cry. That's fine, but do it outside. With the person, you have to be as strong and as positive as possible. According to Jewish law, you are allowed, encouraged, sometimes it doesn't always work, but you are allowed to withhold unhappy news. You are. The doctor says something to you, you don't have to run to the patient and say, oh, the doctor says that, your demise is going to be by the end of the week. Shut up. You don't have to say it. For two reasons. One is the person will become despondent. Two, give up hope. Right? And three, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Not always the doctors are right. But there's somebody at the Chai Center community who the doctors gave this fellow 6 months and he lasted 20 years. 20 years. 20 years instead of 6 months. So, doctors are not God. And it says in the Torah that God is a doctor, but it's not the other way around, even though sometimes doctors make that mistake. And therefore you are allowed to withhold bad news. Now sometimes a patient says, I need to know. I need to know. And other times it's good for the person to know because they have a lot of affairs to settle but not every gory detail do they have to know. Right? They just don't. They tell a story when Ben Gurion, when the first Prime Minister of Israel, Ben Gurion, when he was sick in the hospital, and one of his good friends committed suicide when he was in hospital. So they didn't know what to do, to tell him or not. And they asked advice, and they were told, don't tell him, because this will hurt his recovery or hasten his death. The thing is, Ben Gurion was an avid reader, and he read the news every day. Because he read the news every day, and this person who committed suicide was a member of the cabinet and a dear good friend, he would read it in the newspaper. So they prevailed on the largest newspaper. For all I know, it could have been the only newspaper. They prevailed on the newspaper, print the news, but print a couple of copies which has been doctored, that don't have a mention of this Ben Gurion's friend's suicide. Just don't print it in the paper. So they printed, 10,000. I don't know how many copies in Israel back then, and in the 50s, they printed 10,000 copies, and they printed one or two without that particular story. It probably came at great cost to them, but that's what they were asked to do. And they did it, and that was the reasoning, is they don't want to create extra pain and suffering for Ben Gurion because he has to fight. He has to fight. I remember I had a classmate who was very sick, lung cancer, and while he was undergoing chemo, his brother died in a jet ski accident, and the family didn't know what to do. Eventually they told him, so he was there for the burial, and he was there for Shiva, and he turned to me and he says, I have to compartmentalize this. If I think about my brother, I'm not going to be able to get healthy. So I'm going to compartmentalize this. I'm going to pretend this never happened, even though it did happen, which is incredibly strong. I know he passed shortly thereafter, but the idea is alive and well. When a person is sick, you are actually allowed to in order to you can be a help to them. For example, a woman, she goes into labor, and it's Shabbat when normally nobody drives. You can drive to hospital, because she's sick, and to send her to hospital alone is going to create, it's terrible. A woman to go to the hospital alone while the husband is back at home eating his Friday night meal. No, you're allowed to go. It's Shabbat gets somewhat relegated to the side because you need to be there with the person to help them, to strengthen them, to be a support, etc., etc. That's just one example. I get calls. I just got a call yesterday from a woman whose daughter is in rehab for anorexia, and so she asked me that is it okay? She called me yesterday to say that her daughter called her on Shabbat, and she normally doesn't take the phone on Shabbat. Is it okay for her to take the phone? Because she did. Is that okay? I said, it's holy. Your daughter has anorexia, and which is a terrible, debilitating disease, and highest suicide rate highest mortality rate in mental illness, and including suicidal deaths. I said, take the phone. Your daughter calls, you take that phone, because she needs your support. Right? Is she in? Is she going to die right then and there if you don't answer it? So, you would think, don't take the call. No, you take the call. Right. Now, it's important to pray for the person and to let the person know they're being prayed for. In Judaism, we call it Mishaberach, that every time a Torah is brought out, whether it's Monday, Thursday, or Saturday, when the Torah is read publicly, it's read those 3 days of the week. So that way 3 days do not pass without the Torah being read publicly. So every time the Torah is read, we say Mishaberach. Mishaberach is basically a prayer for the sick. And we say a prayer for the person, son or daughter of the mother. If we know the mother's name, Becky, the daughter of Janice, that's great. If we don't know the mother's name, we just say Sarah, which is the first mom of the Jewish people, right? If we know the Hebrew name, we say the Hebrew name. We don't know the Hebrew name, we say the English name. And we say a prayer. We say a prayer. The days the Torah is not taken out, doesn't mean we don't pray. It's just the Torah is not taken out and placed on the platform, so therefore there's no open Torah. But that doesn't mean we don't say a prayer. We say psalms, we say a silent prayer from our heart, etc., asking for the person to get healed, to get strength. And you can Google it. They did studies about people who knew they were being prayed for, how they actually healed quicker than people who did not know or were not prayed for. And it's a study. I forget if it was a study in Harvard or it was an Ivy League study. And it's an incredible thing. So it's part and parcel of Bikur Cholim, of visiting the sick, is to take their name down and to say a prayer for them. And and disseminate the prayer. Send it to WhatsApp now, and they have these different prayer groups. Send it all around, and have the more the merrier. If the person is gravely ill and you come visit, and the doctors say it's going to happen over the next few hours, you're not allowed to leave. So you're visiting the sick. If you're a family member, you don't want to leave. But if the family member's not there, and you're there and the doctors say this is imminent, you can't leave. Because it's considered the greatest comfort and one of the greatest mitzvahs is to be in the room when the soul leaves the body. And that's also part of visiting the sick, is you're there until the end. So you're not allowed to leave. There's a dying person, actively dying person, you're not allowed to leave. And you stay there and you say prayers. You can talk to the person, you can sing a song, you could shoot the breeze. You're kind of talking to yourself for the most part, not necessarily. I have actually an incredible story. It happened with this woman had been out. She's been unresponsive for days. And the family came. The family called me and asked, could I come and basically say the last rites. Judaism doesn't have last rites per se, but we do have something called the Shema. So I came. She hadn't once again been responsive in days. Said the Shema, and then I sung a little Jewish lullaby. Once this lullaby was over, this woman opened her eyes. She asked to sit up. She was helped. Remember, unresponsive for days. And she turned to me and said, Rabbi, what should I be telling my family now? So I said to her, tell them you love them. She proceeded to talk to them, and then at some point I left, and she went back afterwards into unresponsive state, and she died a couple of days later without regaining consciousness. So it's important to be there. It gave her a tremendous source of comfort that she was able to talk to her family and didn't wake up and see nobody around. And so the family knew it was imminent. The family stuck around. And by the way, on the flip side of the same coin, really, once a person passes, you're still not allowed to leave. You have to remain there. It's considered disrespectful to the corpse, which housed a soul for 100 years, to be left bereft of a visitor. So you're there and you say Psalms, and you serve as a spiritual protection or connection, and you don't leave until somebody replaces you, until eventually the funeral director will pick up the body. Very important, by the way. It's huge. Now, so we spoke about prayer. We spoke about being there. And once again, your job is to do everything in your power to help the person. Doc, they need more morphine. Doc, I think you need to. We don't want them to get bed sores. Doc, when was the last time they were moved? Turn them over. Supine, etc. That's part of your job. Is to make sure that the doctor, the hospital, the nursing home, the hospice are not just forgetting about the person, but rather are active in their care. And that's part and parcel of the job of Bikur Cholim. Now, it's not so big in Suffolk County, but there's certain hospitals in Nassau County, Long Island. We have Winthrop, and we have North Shore and LIJ. They all have a Bikur Cholim room, which is amazing. I mean, and they have it in many places in Manhattan, and I use it. And when my daughter was in hospital in LIJ, and when she was in hospital in Westchester, I used it a lot. Basically, what it is, it's the Bikur Cholim Society. It's a group of just righteous women, really, men and women. And what they do is they stock a room with kosher food, hot water, coffee, sandwiches, papers, newspapers, books, chairs, pillows, lazy boys. It depends how big the actual Bikur Cholim room is. In the place in Westchester, I actually, there was one Friday night, and it was too cold to walk back to the hotel, so I slept there. I just slept there. I just slept in that room. It was big enough. And they had warm food for Shabbat. They had cold food. I mean, it was just amazing. And it's called Bikur Cholim Societies. And where they really excel is the Bikur Cholim Society of Brooklyn, which is housed in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. They're all over Brooklyn and all over Manhattan. Just incredible. And I don't know how they do it, but they have their finger on the pulse. And it's a worthy organization. I'll give an example. I was visiting this woman in hospital who had behind the eye brain surgery. Very, very difficult surgery. And so she was there for 10 days. I visited her a couple times. And I visited her, the last time I visited her was on the day before she was supposed to get out. When I was there, the doctor came in and says, Mrs. So-and-so, we're not going to let you out tomorrow. We're watching. We want to make sure there's no, no aneurysm. We're watching it, and therefore, we're not going to let you out tomorrow. We're going to keep you for another couple of days. So this woman turned to me and said, Rabbi, can you call the Bikur Cholim and tell them to continue with the kosher meals they provide? So you can get kosher meals from the hospital, or you can get nicer kosher meals from Bikur Cholim free of charge. Right? And so when I left her, I called the Bikur Cholim because I had their number, and I said, I'm calling from Lenox Hill, and I'm calling from so-and-so. He says, what's the name of the patient? I said, what's the room number? I said, he says, oh, yeah, she's staying an extra couple of days. Remember, I only found that out 10 minutes ago. They knew it like this. They knew it. They probably knew it before she knew it, which is incredible. Then what Bikur Cholim have done is that you have a loved one in Manhattan and you have to be there for the weekend, right? So in Westchester, I stayed in the hospital in the Bikur Cholim room. But you have to be there, near Memorial Sloan and Lenox Hill and Mount Sinai and Columbia, and right, and what they have is apartment buildings, apartments, not buildings. They have an apartment in an apartment building. First come, first serve. You have to be there for a weekend because you don't drive on Shabbat, or you can call up this number and give them your particulars, and they confirm with you. And they tell you where to pick up the phone or the combination or whatever it is. I've never used it personally. And it's almost like a Jewish Ronald McDonald house for the weekend. And you get to stay there. And it's a stocked fridge, oven. It's a full apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. And you can Google it. You'll see it. So Bikur Cholim really rates in the Jewish totem pole. There's a daily prayer that we say in the morning. He says these, and basically the prayer is as follows. These are the following items have no share, they have no limit. In other words, the mitzvah you can do as much as you can do. There's no maximum. And one of them is Bikur Cholim. It's no, okay, you visited 13 people for the day, stop. You can't visit. No. Visit. Do whatever you can. As much as you can. Houses and visits and spoon feeding and whatever. Shopping for the individual. A couple people take me up on it where they're too sick to go shopping. And they give me a list. I go to ShopRite. No big deal. Pick it up. Drop it off. And that's Bikur Cholim. Right? During COVID, we had a small army picking up food for different people. Because in the beginning stages of COVID, people were afraid to leave, and so more so the elderly, the immunocompromised. So that all comes under the parcel of Bikur Cholim. So I would encourage you, where they let you in, you should go visit. And in Huntington, as an example, when I'm called, I go. But they even have, if you are a volunteer, a certified volunteer, which means you have to have a flu shot, etc. Certified volunteer, then you can just, I don't know about COVID, but then you can just go, and you can just say, I'm here, the volunteer. I'm a registered volunteer. And they give you a list of patients, Jewish patients, Christian patients, Protestant, Episcopalian, etc., and you go visit. You go visit because you are registered as a quintessential volunteer that visits the sick. It's immeasurable what you do for the person. It's just incredible, and it's encouraged. When I visit the hospital, sometimes I come out, saying, wow, that was a great visit, and I'm glad I went. Other times I come out with a heavy heart because what I witnessed, didn't want to witness, doesn't detract from the mitzvah. Just because I had a hard time with it doesn't mean I didn't accomplish what I sought to accomplish, as long as they didn't see it on my face. God bless, be well. That's all for now. If you have questions, rabbi@thechaicenter.com. If you wish to see this or other classes, it's thechaicenter.com/academy or thechaicenter.com/podcast. And you'll be able to see previous classes, prior classes, and courses online. God bless. Please feel free to share. If you want to know how to spell Bikur Cholim, so this is I believe, how they spell it. All right, be well.